1, Chapter 12. It's March 1985. The day has finally arrived when Ben and Zoe are to be reunited after adventures in the East. The plan had always been Leicester Square, London, outside a fast food chain. Zoe is the first to sight her old friend and does something of a double take. Not least because he is so much slimmer and broader than she remembers. She tiptoes in his direction. Just as she is about to tap Ben on the shoulder, he sinks, avoiding her hand, and spins around, dropping into an en garde posture and shocking Zoe with his speed. He smiles, and they hug. Then, standing back from each other in early spring's bright sunlight, they survey the changes a decade has wrought. Ben's old school friend blends in easily with her surroundings, holding herself with effortless poise, sporting black leggings, a baggy fawn jumper, and high-top canvas trainers that incorporate the star-spangled banner. Ben is dressed in an untucked Nehru-collared white linen shirt, simple slip-on shoes and jogging bottoms. In his absence, Zoe has become a stunningly attractive woman. "Wow, you look..." The word in Ben's mind is incredible, but at the last moment he substitutes it with healthy? "You mean chubby, don't you?" No. Quickly realizing he has treated Zoe's reply overly seriously, Ben can't help but smile. He begins to scrutinize his old friend's features, reading every line as though it were a book rather than her face. Recoiling somewhat, she raises her eyebrows. Ben does not seem to notice. "Your travels have suited you well, Zoe." Zoe breaks eye contact. Ben stares at her long ebony hair. "Being around all those dark-haired people must have rubbed off on you. Or did you colour your hair just to match your leg wear?" Zoe smiles, her mouth slipping open slightly as she does so. Her top lip draws down automatically over her front teeth. She notices that Ben has twigged her old habit. He says nothing. "Unbelievable, isn't it? Even now, with a quarter of a century gone, and that South London pavement is still giving me a fat lip." The soul-bearing honesty of the statement, the recalling of Zoe's childhood bicycle accident, that feels to Ben like a shared secret, brings a lump to his throat. His eyes glisten. Ben can't help but recall the first time Zoe told him about the incident and how, as a young girl, she used Mary Poppins-like rhymes to try to magic her front teeth back. Ben claws his mind for the words appropriate to this moment. He settles on a few that, once spoken, for him at least, utterly devalue this moment of connection. "But you want to grab a bite to eat? Do you remember any decent places round here?" Zoe snaps out of her short-lived daydream. "I should know some. I've been..." "Sure. Follow me, Benjamin." Zoe steps closer to Ben and swivels, interlocking an arm with that of her old friend. Nearly skipping, she drags him forward, evidently keen to share tales from the intervening decade. The scenario triggers in Ben a brief memory of his initial encounter with the two devotee girls in India, but he struggles to recollect their names. It amuses him that he is not able to remember, not least because he would regularly take Gideon to task for exactly that. He chuckles to himself. Zoe assumes it is her actions that have invigorated Ben and smiles. Making their way towards London's Chinatown, they pass rows of restaurant windows filled with the headless, featherless, crispy brown poultry, hanging glistening their own best advertisements, at least for meat-eaters. Ben is next to speak, and does so in China's common tongue. Would you like Peking duck or not? Zoe laughs, but doesn't answer. Ben tries again, this time drawing upon a southern Chinese dialect. Or we could just gorge ourselves on roast pork buns. It feels like years since I really ate to the point of death. Zoe smiles. Ben reverts to English. Not like you to be shy about languages. You seem to learn by osmosis at school. I never saw you so much as read a French or German textbook. Straight A's, wasn't it? Can't wait to find out where you travelled in China. And where else? India? Nepal? Malaysia? Your talents. You could have found a way to blend in almost anywhere. Well, not quite, or we would have bumped into each other. I spend a lot of time in almost anywhere. Zoe shakes her head. But at least her companion is beginning to sound like the Ben of old. 20 minutes have passed. Zoe and Ben are seated in Fragrant Harbour Cafe. The name is something of a misnomer as, though it does carry the aroma of baking, there is more than just a hint of stale sweat and occasional unsavoury wafts from the nearby toilet. The duo share a small table with a pot of jasmine tea, and at its centre a plate of brilliant yellow egg tarts. Western rock music is played at low volume in the background. Ben taps on the table with his index and middle fingers while Zoe pours. She stops well short of filling the cup. Ben's eyes narrow. He continues to tap, slowly, noiselessly. Eating in this place is almost like eating out there, isn't it? Of course, out there we're usually a minority of one. You must have got used to being the only foreigner as well. Ben takes a sip of tea from a small ivory-hued cup. I'm not entirely sure what I think of as home now. In some ways I feel more of a stranger here than back east. Ben turns the handle of the teapot so that it is nearer to him, lifts it and proceeds to delight in overfilling Zoe's cup. She doesn't seem to notice. You could have had a real drink, you know. I hope you haven't let me drag you in here if you're more of a pub girl these days. By the way, what's with the jumper? No Zoe special badges or other homemade accessories? You are the real Zoe, aren't you? My old friend from 33 Ample Street? Zoe doesn't answer. It seems she is trying to discern something over the general hubbub. Can you believe it, Ben? What? I just realised what's playing. It's one of the very few songs we ever loved. Both of us, I mean. Ben strains to cut out the hum of the room. Finally, his ears tune in just enough to the sound for him to confirm the track to himself. It's Bowie, isn't it? Space Oddity. Still sounds great. The two share a moment, transported to more innocent days when music spirited them away from the turgid normality Ben was convinced they both despised. I meant to ask you sooner. How's Grandad? I haven't seen him for a while. Did he even know you're coming back? Ben bites at the skin below his lower lip, allowing it to gently escape his front teeth before answering. It's okay, but it shocked me to see him as a really old man. I always thought of him as different from normal granddads, like a super granddad. Noting the cheesiness of his words, Ben pauses. Anyway, now he's in his 90s and sometimes struggles to get out of his chair. I'm not sure if you know, but seems he's had some trouble with a few of the kids in the street while I was away. I think they see him as an easy target. I don't like to tell him, but I have noticed a few things that have gone from the house. It's not exactly a fortress. Possible one or two of them may have got in and had a rummage around while others delayed him out in the street. Zoe looks up from the tart she has been slowly nudging with the trembling fingernail of a middle finger. He wanted to give him a good hiding. I told him to forget it. He's a stubborn old goat. I think he's even got into a shoving match with a few of them. I said, things like that only escalate. Wasting my breath, though. He's a proud man. Not sure why I'm telling you that, Zoe. You know he'd rather die than back down. From anything. Zoe reaches forward and rubs Ben's upper arm. His triceps muscle is pronounced. Maybe he's flexing, just a little. At least he's got you again. Perhaps you can gift him some of that strength you brought back from your adventures. Zoe tentatively sips from her comically full cup. The momentary obscuring of her other features leaves Ben's sole focal point, her strikingly emerald eyes. Come on then, Angel, spill the beans. What in heaven's name did you get up to on your travels? Zoe looks confused, and a little rouge. She almost chokes some tea back into her cup, ultimately averting the incident, but in doing so, eliciting a not-so-dainty coughing fit. She lowers the shaking vessel to the table and proceeds to dab her lips and the corners of her mouth with a paper serviette, whilst doing her best to ignore the various looks of contempt from fellow patrons. Ben notes Zoe's cup has been positioned close to the edge of the table and goes to retrieve it. Zoe reaches out too, her fingers lightly encircling his. Still a worrier then, eh? Not learned to trust life yet? It seems Ben may be too busy tingling at Zoe's touch to pay attention to her teasing. In any case, he is sidetracked by something. You've still got a scar on your thumb. Those pins of yours must have cut us deeper than we imagined. I've got mine too. Ben shows Zoe the proof. I only noticed it again this morning when I got out of the shower. It's more visible when I spend... Anyway, blood brother and sister meet again. They endure an uncomfortable silence. Sorry, Zoe. Today means so much to me, but somehow it's like just another day to you. Am I being unfair? I'm being unfair, aren't I? Zoe smiles, but her eyes have dimmed and she struggles to look up. Ben continues. Okay. It felt like someone just walked across my grave. Is there something you need to tell me? Zoe carefully drinks some more tea and then looks down into her near-empty cup. She slowly oscillates the dregs clockwise and then anti-clockwise, as though engaging in a bout of divination. I did go on a journey, you know. Of course I know. It was never the plan to meet up out there. The intention was always to tread our own paths and bring back knowledge and share it. Zoe lets out a big sigh. You actually did it. You didn't just talk about it. You pulled the trigger, Ben. You went off on your own and really lived your dream. Do you have any idea how incredible that is? I want you to know that if no one else in the world knows that, I know that. When you were in pain or considering chucking it all in and coming home, I was thinking of you, willing you to stay strong and to never be ordinary. Ben appears to be replaying Zoe's words in his head. Zoe draws in a deep breath through her nose and looks directly into Ben's eyes. I had the tickets and then my bloody mother got involved. You heard about that? Why I didn't leave as planned. I know I said I'd follow on once everything was resolved, but one thing led to another. So you're saying you never went travelling? Zoe meets Ben's incredulous stare. Well, before I knew it, I was in a relationship and time just slipped by. Despite herself, Zoe suddenly can't help but see the whole situation as comedic. she finds herself doing everything she can to control an unwanted impulse to smile, or, worse still, to laugh. A relationship? Zoe leans back on her chair, her head and neck reversing more than her torso. It's almost as if she were reenacting a slow-motion whiplash. After a while, she rights herself. Do you remember Jason, Ben? Ben reacts with his entire body too, as though having been punched hard in the chest, then quickly does his best to bring his reaction under control. Jason? Not the Jason your mother was always trying to set you up with. Parker, wasn't it? Zoe's lips are pressed tightly together, perhaps in an effort to prevent her face giving away her emotions. With an innocuous but at the same time devastating nod, Zoe provides Ben the confirmation he's asked for, but likely didn't want to hear. Yup, that Jason, Ben. We live together. We've been in the same flat for almost 10 years and married for most of that time. Married? Ben scans Zoe's fingers. It's funny really, because now you're the one in shape, like Jay, well, like he used to be, and he's not so much these days. For years. They are both silent again. The background noise, the climax to the Waterboys, The Whole of the Moon, melts away. I know everything doesn't go to plan, to a personal plan at least, but I trained for what felt like forever and suffered and travelled thousands of miles to find my real home, and you. It doesn't take much internal reflection for Zoe to register that, for Ben, today was a long-awaited chance to display hard-won talents. Instead, Ben has found himself re-evaluating the decade's unexpected changes. It strikes Zoe that, knowing him as well as she once did, Ben has probably waited years to accidentally reveal his flat stomach. After all, who wouldn't want to display a body so diametrically opposed to the one that left on its travels? In any case, it's Ben that continues. Tell me how you did it. How did you become this tranquil? I can't believe that just happened. Zoe reaches forward, taking Ben's hand in hers. The spiritually and martially adept young man opposite her is perhaps finally sensing that he has lost a battle he wasn't even aware he was in. One for the heart of his angel. What can I tell you? I'm not even sure you'll believe me if I do. It's almost laughable what... Zoe draws speech marks in the air. Ben has no idea what she's doing. Happened? She smiles. You did do something, even if that something was here. Ben bangs down on the table for added emphasis. Cups, plates and cutlery jiggle. Zoe jumps and then, on refinding her equilibrium, sighs. A waitress shoots eye daggers at her companion. Here? Yeah, I suppose it was. Weird though, isn't it? Because when people look back on the 70s in England, it will be remembered as the decade when boredom was our entertainment. Zoe runs her tongue over her front teeth, her mouth closed as she does so. I suppose there was a shift of some kind, but no system. I didn't join my mother and become High Priestess of the Women's Institute or the Ladies' Circle, if that's what you're worried about. Well, at least not that I know of. If anything, I just came across a sort of comic book in a charity shop when I was dropping off some old... Zoe pauses, deciding it is better not to go into more detail about the clear-out that culminated in her arrival at a charity store. Not least because she was purging everything to do with her mutually planned travels after buckling to Jason's relentless pressure. A comic book? Oh, yeah. I saw the cover and for some reason you popped into my mind. So I picked it up and flicked through. I liked some of the pictures and then I somehow absorbed a couple of lines. Ben leans forward. A couple of... What did they say? Well, it's going to sound weird, even to you. Okay, the line that I remembered was... The material matters not. The immaterial matters greatly. Cheap New Age stuff. I've no idea why it had such an impact. I mean, that phrase, in and of itself, why should it? The material matters not. The immaterial matters greatly. Somehow that bloody thing got stuck in my mind, like a bad pop song repeating in the background. Ben bangs the table again. A mantra. The cafe's occupants glare at him. Once again, Zoe's companion seems utterly oblivious to his eccentricities. She, however, is keenly aware of her friend's growing reputation as something of an oddball in this conservative environment. As such, Zoe continues in a whisper, maybe in an effort to train Ben by imitation. Perhaps, Ben, I don't know. For some reason, I just couldn't shake it, and it played over and over, even when I was sleeping. Any time it was quiet, it seemed to be there, like that tinnitus thing people get when they've listened to too much loud music. You must know about that, all that heavy rubbish you're into. Ben glances left and right, as if to check for unseen surveillance, and then he does indeed begin speaking in hushed tones too. That sort of thing can take years of diligent practice. You just did it without... Wow. All I know is that one day those lines just went, and along with it, something of me. Perhaps it was the part of me that ever took me too seriously. Ben picks up a chopstick from the table, positioning it narrow end down on the tip of his middle finger. With a flick, the hard plastic dances through 360 degrees and lands perfectly balanced as though it had never moved. This time her old friend's oddness makes Zoe laugh. I'm going to have to use one of your favourite words, Mr. Hopes. You're incorrigible. Ben appears to have tuned out from his old friend. He whispers to himself under his breath. I saw the crescent, but you've seen the whole of the moon. Zoe can feel herself blushing, but isn't entirely sure why. After a while, she claps her hands together. Hey, Mr. Kung Fu Master, what about getting us out of here and you teaching me a few tricks? You never know when an 80s girl might need to fight off a supervillain. Ben breaks free from deep thought and, without looking up, calls for the bill in Cantonese. Zoe has no idea about Chinese dialects. It could be Greek to her, but she does note the sneer on the waitress's face, and that makes her grin. Ben notices nothing. His new focus is exclusively his planning of the fastest way to begin his students' introduction to the subtleties of fighting without fighting. Direct us to the nearest park, Zoe. I hope you haven't lost that wonderful temper of yours. You might need it. Once away from the cafe, the pair hustle north through the packed streets of London's West End. Oh, here's something you're never going to believe. Do you remember that thug? The one that terrorised us at school? You mean the one that took a flying lesson with the bus conductor? Tony, wasn't it? Wow, impressive, Benjamin. You do remember then. Well, he only brought out a book. But the bit that's even crazier is, it's become a bestseller. I'm not saying he wrote it all, but evidently it was his story. The biography of an abused kid and life in the underworld. A lot of the book was about how he was mistreated growing up. How he was mistreated? That's rich. I know, right? Anyway, I read some of it. The title was something like Dark Days, Light Nights,
days, D-A-Z-E, as in dazed and confused, and nights with a K, the type of knight you may have wanted to be when you were really young. The sort I probably hoped would pluck me from suburbia. Maybe the sort you've become.
She laughs, allowing her guard to slip for just a moment, enough to expose her teeth. Ben tightens his grip on Zoe's interlocked arm, pulling her closer. He can feel her bosom just above his elbow. The sensation disturbs him for a moment, but he copes.
Zoe, I seem to remember that you loved all those horror films in the 70s. Even more than I did. What were your favourites again? Oh, yes, The Exorcist. As I recall, you begged to watch that again and again. Wasn't your first choice always Rosemary's Baby? If you really commit yourself to learn what I'm about to teach you, I'll reward you with a copy of that on one of those video cassette things.
Zoe disentangles her arm from Ben's.
You cheeky blighter, you know they all gave me nightmares. Besides, I think you'll find Rosemary's Baby came out in the 60s, not 70s.
Ben prods Zoe with the curled knuckle of his index finger through her fluffy jumper and into a floating rib. It tickles and is slightly painful at the same time. Zoe squeals.
But you didn't see it until the 70s, did you? And I bet you took most of that decade before you could sleep without the light on.
Ben pushes Zoe's upper arm with his palm, almost sending her careering off the pavement.
Hey!
They enter Regent's Park, flanked by impressively tall black iron gates.
You should read Tony's book. You'd probably finish it. It even mentions that time he got dragged off by that guy on the bus. Evidently that event changed the whole course of his life. We should be getting some royalties.
They both smile. This time it's Ben that is first to adopt a more serious countenance. He strides out to a patch of grass, notable for no other reason than being devoid of people. He then beckons Zoe to join him.
Talking of school bullies, maybe the best idea is to teach you how to take a fall. Are you sure you've had time to digest whatever you ended up eating? Given what I've got in store for you, there's every chance we might be seeing those egg tarts again.
Now alongside him, Zoe prods Ben in the chest with her fingertips, but the time for levity has passed.
Time to bring out the inner warrior in you.
In a flash, Ben positions himself behind Zoe, using a straight right arm to guide her over his right knee to the floor. Somehow she manages to twist and avoid an unsightly fall, her meeting with the ground carrying with it a smidgen of finesse.
You bastard! Just as I thought. A natural.
Ben cracks the smallest of smiles. Feigning anger, Zoe punches the moist grass and begins straightening from a squat position.
I just realised something, Zoe. I may be able to teach you what I've learned over the last 10 years, just like we promised each other, but you can still keep your side of the bargain. You can help me catch up with what I missed. Sounds like a tougher job than teaching me to become a ninja.
Taking advantage of Ben's penchant for glancing heavenward, Zoe's hands wrap around his jogging bottoms just above his ankles, and she gives a healthy tug. Ben doesn't move an inch. Her upward force sends Zoe rocketing face first into a particularly muddy patch to Ben's side. Ben cannot control his laughter. Zoe staggers to her feet, anxiously rubbing her mouth and face and spitting out blades of grass. She pulls at the twisted neck of her jumper, ostensibly ridding the inside of any stray nastiness, but at the same time dipping in and out of a chest-level pocket in the white shirt beneath it.
I'll make you pay for that, Mr. Hopes.